Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So this one is going to be about the King James Version of the Bible. Now this is the big translation that is like the most widely popular translation, and we'll go look at all the details about how many people have used it, how widely spread it is, and we're going to look at the exact text that this was used to translate, called the Textus Receptus, and it was from 1516. The King James is about a century after that. Now we're going to take a look at the sources and see if this translation, the most widely spread translation, is actually correct. So let's start off with the King James Version, okay? How popular is the King James Version? And it says, remains exceptionally popular, with studies as late as 2014 to 17 showing it as the preferred Bible for over 55% of American Bible readers. So over half of the country of the United States is using this translation. Okay, that's huge, because if they're reading an incorrect translation and it's over half the population, they're reading an incorrect version of the Bible. It is the best-selling book in history. Okay, best-selling book in history, the King James Version. And globally, the King James remains a major, influential, and widely used translation in many English-speaking countries. So let's take a look at Wikipedia now for the King James Version and have a look at what text they were using to translate this book. Now, right here on Wikipedia, it says, this is the textual basis for this translation, the King James Version. Now, the Old Testament was used the Masoretic text, which is like 1000 AD. It's not the Septuagint. For the New Testament, they used the Textus Receptus. Now, the Textus Receptus, or the received text, is a series of printed Greek New Testament editions produced between 1516, which is what I'm going to show you, the 1516 edition, the original. The Textus Receptus is primarily based on 12th century or later Byzantine manuscripts. So this is only 300 years, well, 400 years after these texts were written in Byzantine. The problem we have here is, look, while the manuscripts used were late, they represent Byzantine text type tradition, which makes up over 95% of the existing Greek manuscripts. However, distinct from oldest copies, the Textus Receptus relied on much later manuscripts, often 1,000 years removed from the original writings. As an American or anyone else around the English-speaking world, if you're using the King James Version, just know that it is nowhere near as close to what the original Greek text says. It is nowhere near as close. So if you're saying this is the inspired word of God and it's infallible, like it can't be touched, it's bullshit. Because this is from later texts. And we have the Codex Vaticanus, which it references right here, which is 4th century, 350 AD. So let's take a look at the Vaticanus. What is the popular consensus that the AI and the internet is telling people in 2026 about the Codex Vaticanus? The Codex Vaticanus is a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Bible, generally dated to approximately 300 to 350 AD. This is the important bit, really important bit. It's widely considered one of the oldest and most reliable. Okay, so if it's the most reliable, and the Codex Vaticanus has been sitting in the Vatican Library since the 1400s, the 15th century, that is before the Receptus was written in 1516, compiled in 1516. So when they were doing the King James edition, which is in the 1600s, the 17th century, why didn't the King James translators use the Vaticanus or a copy of the Vaticanus that the Vatican could have given to the translators for the King James? Well, the King James was being written by people who were not pro-Catholic. They were Protestants. So it was Church of England. So they left the Catholic Church with King Henry VIII earlier. Why would the Vatican want anything to do with the King James translation? So it says the Codex Vaticanus was not used for the King James Bible because it was not accessible to the translators and was kept under strict restricted access by the Vatican Library. And look, it says partial availability. Even when scholars received partial information about the Vaticanus, they often viewed it with suspicion as it differed from the traditional text they were accustomed to using. They're saying the Vaticanus is the oldest and most reliable, but no one was allowed to see it because it's very different. So the Vatican did not want these Protestant Christians or heretics to be using their text, especially when it's different. And we've just seen, it says there are differences in the Codex Vaticanus, which I've shown before, and people were skeptical of it because it's like, this is so weird. We haven't seen this. But even the AI and Google says it's one of the oldest and most reliable extant manuscripts. So if it's the most reliable, why wasn't it more spread out? Because they have differences in it that maybe they didn't want people to see. So that's why you have now, with the King James Version, a completely different edition to what the original, closest to the original text that we can get, and the closest to the most reliable text we can get, according to this. If the King James used the Codex Vaticanus, it would not say what it does today. So let's take a look at what was used for the King James translation and why we get the translation we have today. Now this is Mark 14, 48, 52 in the Textus Receptus, where we get our original King James Version from, the Greek. This is the arrest of Jesus with the little boy, the Neoniskos. Now right here up the top right, hos epi leistein. Leistes, we've seen that many times, I've shown that in many videos. Leistes is the word for piratai. Now what's a pirates? A pirate. And in earlier Greek, it was a leistes. Kentaro is also identified as by Hesychius as equal to leistai, and of paiderastai. Paiderastes, right there, you know what we're talking about. We have leistes. And now down here, kai eistis neaniskos. Look at how they're using these symbols to connect multiple letters. Ekoluthe with the sindona epigumno upon his nakedness. Kai kratusin auton. Oi neaniskoi. You know, this makes more sense now that it was only young servants were arresting another young servant. If you're a bunch of dudes and you're arresting another dude, you wouldn't just let him run off. You would hold on to him and be like, okay, under arrest with heavy weapons. You would hold the weapons to him and be like, okay, you're under arrest, let's fucking go. Not you send a couple little kids to arrest another little kid. At some point, that first Neoniskos who's with Jesus happens to run off. How would that happen if a bunch of men are arresting a man? It's not. It says kids were arresting another kid. And this is where we have the English. It says as against a thief. So it says thief right there. So the King James is saying thief. But we know the word is leistes. Now, whoever's translating from this text to the King James Version either doesn't know how to translate or they're making it up and they're lying, because a leistes is not a thief. A thief is a kleptes. And just to prove that to you, here's what the lexicon says. Kleptes, a thief. And this is how it's translated in the New Testament, in the King James. Now you'll see here it says leistas e kleptas, Plato's Republic. And it's distinguishing between two differences, leistas or kleptas. Right here where it says thief, and he's crucified between two thieves, it doesn't say that. It says between two leistai, two traffickers. You're reading thief in the King James, and it is wrong. It is an incorrect translation. Now, you can see this and you can take it and be like, okay, well, fuck me, this is not right. I should not believe this. It's just not right. It's just not right. So whoever was translating it either didn't know Greek or they did it on purpose to say thief instead of a child trafficker. Let's take a look at what it says in the Codex Vaticanus, the oldest and most reliable text, yeah? So this is an alpha, it's all in capital letters, autos os epi leistes, or they put a little AI here, see that? You can put a little AI before you start the next word, kai. So they don't always finish the word in the Vaticanus. You kind of got to know what you're reading. So that's 48, it says os epi leistes, okay? So leistes, that's what it says in the Vaticanus. And then 1451, kai neaniskos, right here, in the middle. Kai neaniskos, let me see if I can go more. Neaniskos tis sune koluthe auto peribeblemenos, Byzantine sigmas, sindona, they put a little alpha here at the end, epi gumnu, kai kratusin auton, so it doesn't have the other oi neaniskoi in it, which the Textus Receptus does. Ode katalipon ten sindona gumnos efugen. So this does not have oi neaniskoi in it, but it still says leistes. So whoever translated leistes is doing it incorrectly in the King James Version. And here's Mark 15:27 to show you that he was crucified with two other leistai. You say saurosin, which is staurosin, 15:27. Duo leistas. It says here. So there's a tau in the middle. So there's sigma, tau, alpha. Duo leistas. And it says two thieves in the King James Version, but it's the same word we just saw Jesus say. So whoever is translating this is doing it incorrectly. And everyone who's reading the King James Version is reading an incorrect version of the New Testament. It's an incorrect translation. Someone fucked up the translation, right here. It is not a thief. You've got to stop saying thief, because that is not the ancient Greek word used in any text that we see. None of them say ekleptes. It all says leistes leistas. Okay, so we got to stop saying thief. It was not a thief. He was not claiming to be a thief. He was not crucified with thieves. He was crucified with leistai. That's in every text in ancient Greek for the New Testament. Nowhere does it say kleptes, where it says leistes. Now let's take a look at the sabachthani reference in the Textus Receptus, because this is where we get heli, heli, lama sabachthani. So these are using from the Byzantine texts, which have heli, not Eloi, which we see in the Vaticanus, which is here. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, with a kappa and a tau, where this uses a he and a theta. In the other text we have sabachthani, but here's what it says in the Vaticanus, zabaphoni. So if the Codex Vaticanus was used for the King James Version, we would be seeing English say lama zabaphani or foani if they translated it in the King James. And in Matthew, we would be seeing sabachthani. So there's two differences here in the Codex Vaticanus, and if they were used for the King James, we wouldn't be even saying sabachthani. But the Vatican didn't want anyone to look at this one for a long time, and especially not heretics like the early Protestants. So why would the Vatican want to give their most precious text, the base of Christianity, the New Testament, the oldest version and most reliable New Testament, why would they want to give that to a bunch of heretics who want to translate into English? There's no way. And now you can see for yourself that the King James Version, based on this text right here, the Textus Receptus, was mistranslated at best with what I've just shown you. At worst, it's a direct fabrication to take you away from what the reality actually is and what it actually says. Because it is not a kleptes, it is not a thief. And they are not thieves he's crucified with. From now on, and you see it say thief, just know that it's not a thief. This is not what it says. The King James English translation is incorrect. I've just shown you that it's false based on the source text it uses itself. I'm not talking about any other text earlier than that. Just this text right here, which is based off, the English translation is incorrect based on what this says right here. So don't trust it. Don't use it. Don't trust it. Only use it for comparing texts and to show people, hey, this is the incorrect translation because this word does not mean this. A thief, it actually means this. A pirate. And in earlier Greek, it was a leistes. Kentaro is equal to leistai. And paiderastes, right there, you know what we're talking about. This word here, thief, is not what the text says that the King James is pulling from. It's not what it says. So someone is lying to you or terribly translating. Either way, that's fucked up. That's the reality we're living in.